thank you for joining us for this session. There's one question which is already here, and so I'll start with that. If that's okay, Andrew, or if you wanted to start with Q&A, or are you happy with that?
Let's see, we got a question in the Q&A already. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're ready. Yeah, we can.
Yeah. So the question is, how can a boy who suffers from SSA from his past or father neglect or abandonment and hating himself and never getting to embrace his masculinity and has had no male friends, how can he get rid of this, right?
That's a really tough situation, but that is very common. That is sort of like the main version that we see of development of same-sex attraction, at least coming from the developmental model that we use in the approach I'm learning with Joseph Nicolosi Jr. and Sr., based off his dad's work. So I would first say it's not a matter of getting rid of the same-sex attraction, but more a matter of fulfilling it. Because and what I mean by that is there's every guy, whether they've had same-sex lust or not, they're totally heterosexual, totally straight. Every guy in his development needed or has a same-sex attraction, meaning an attraction to someone of the same sex, but it doesn't always get eroticized. So what we're longing for is that connection with men that accept us, men that are salient, meaning that they represent the ideal that we want to emulate. And so with a dad who's salient would be a dad who is perceived by the boy as strong, powerful, but also good, benevolent. He's not just all powerful in that he's mean and harsh and punitive, but he uses power and his strength to be caring and kind and fun. So we enjoy our time with him, and so we have a connection with him. So a dad who's like that, we most want to emulate, and we bond with a dad like that. So it's a matter of actually fulfilling that desire for connection with men who are like that. So we all have that desire. It gets eroticized when there are multiple factors, but in this situation, it's clear that it, based on the developmental model, that the one main contributor is there not being that connection with the dad. And so there's that longing for connection with a salient male that went unfulfilled. And then hating himself makes you think that this boy was also shamed quite a bit for different things. Could be because he didn't develop masculine traits, and so maybe he was bullied by his peers. Maybe he already has a very sensitive temperament, so different types of rejection or perceived rejection really impact him a lot. And he didn't have male friends, so it wasn't, the masculine identification didn't happen through other means. So yeah, the counseling journey will be kind of multifaceted. We're going to want to develop that bonding with the therapist, make that the safe relationship where you can just explore these issues. We want to do a full assessment to check for any other disorders, any other concerns. For example, with the Breakthrough Clinic, I do a lot of work with, I do consulting with Joe Nicolosi Jr. through his Breakthrough Clinic. And we do like a whole array of assessments. We check for just your mental health, We check for depression, social anxiety, sexual compulsive behavior. And one of the main things we're checking for is OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder. What we find is a lot of guys with same-sex eroticization or same-sex lust are also dealing with some degree of obsessive compulsive disorder. And so that contributes to the obsession over, am I good enough? Do I measure up? Am I being rejected? Am I being accepted by these guys? So it becomes obsessive. And then that contributes then to the compulsive behavior, and oftentimes checking. So a lot of times the desire to see a man in a sexual way is a desire to check and see if I measure up. So we want to check for some of those things. I can go into that more in depth. That's probably the greatest thing I've learned from working with Joe Nicolosi. So in general, with the course of therapy, we're going to check for some of those issues. So we're going to look at, okay, what are the fantasies? What is the lust that you're experiencing? And then do the introspection with that and approach it in a mindful manner, meaning like you're going to pay attention to what you're experiencing when you're lusting. And take a look at what are the emotions that you're experiencing. There's going to be the lust, there's going to be the arousal and the attraction. But what else is going on? We want to develop a mindful approach to this. And oftentimes you'll see, well, there's a longing to fulfill those unmet needs for male connection. That's probably the most common thing we see. There may be other needs as well. Maybe it's more specific, like, well, not just connection, but a specific type. Like, I really want to be admired by another guy. I want to be chased. I want to be pursued. I want to be wanted. I want to be praised. So it might get really specific. And then we connect that, okay, when do you remember really desiring that? When was that not fulfilled? What memories come to mind? So we go back to those early experiences that contribute to that desire. And we do usually some form of trauma reprocessing, so such as EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or image transformation therapy, or just mindful self-compassion, where you just visualize yourself giving compassion to your younger self when you go back to those early wounds. So that's one approach we take, is addressing those early wounds of rejection, abandonment, of alienation from other boys, from other men, and reprocessing those memories. And there may be a whole bunch of memories and it may take time, but also it's going to be in the context of a trusting relationship with your therapist, and that also takes some time to develop. So I'm not one to rush that process. I want to make sure that there's trust established. And also encourage taking that chance of building connection with other guys now. We can't exactly go back in the past and redo all the stuff that we wish we could have had, but in the present we can find a couple friends that we can start to share and be open with. And sometimes that takes a while. It takes a lot of courage to start that process. Like, I got one guy working with for a few years at least, and he finally opened up to one of his friends that he's like, this is a safe friend. I know he'll be accepting, and he won't also be gay affirmative, but he'll honor my worldview because he's also a pastor and he knows where he stands in these issues, but I also know he'll be caring and he'll be sensitive and compassionate. He knew that, but he still was scared for quite a long time to disclose that this is a struggle he has. But he finally did it, and he realized, oh gosh, we had to do a lot of work to get him to there. Like, all right, where's that fear coming from? So, as we start the journey, a lot of things may come up, but you want to try to get a support system. That's what I love about having strong support, that you've got a community right there that you can go to. Issues grow when they're kept in secret. They just get worse. And a lot of guys I work with, they try to just deal with this on their own, and they think, okay, I'll just go to therapy, and then I'll get cured. They have this idea, this expectation, they'll just get cured, and then I'll get married, and then I'll act like this was never a problem for me. And it's oftentimes just kind of a fantasy to think that way. So I'm not saying you rush into sharing this issue with others. You know, you want to be careful, be judicious, make sure the person is a safe person who shares your worldview about this issue, but it's not going to shame you or be harsh with you if you struggle with this, but it's going to be accepting and also encouraging you to keep going. So the main idea is there's a deep need there for that genuine, authentic connection with other men. And it's not that you get rid of that desire, it's you fulfill it by healing the wounds and by meeting that need in healthy ways in the present. So
yeah,
I just use that as a launch pad to sort of share the course of therapy in general.
No, that's been really descriptive. And I think the question is definitely a classic example for, as you say, the developmental model. And I know I've had that type of thinking as well. When I started, I was like, okay, I'm going to book some therapy in. It'll be fine, get married, and then, you know, and it's, I remember one of the therapists telling me, this is a lifestyle change. This isn't something which is you're just going to do for 2, 3, 4, 5 years of therapy and then it's going to be gone. It's going to be something you need to address, you know. And then when I heard that, it was like a massive blow, because I was like, what? You completely changed my perspective of, you know, kind of what this is. I thought this is, because, you know, when we deal with things, we think of it as short term. And then I remember thinking, well, if I've thought a certain way for God knows how many years, it's not just going to take 2, 3, 5 years to suddenly change those experiences, or, you know, kind of my coping mechanisms, or my, you know, the way I deal with things. And I think there's a huge surrender piece almost in that saying, okay, you know, I really like the fact that you said all men have SSA, because they do have SSA. You know, all men are attracted to other men because of some feature or the other. And for a lot of us, whenever we are attracted, we think, oh, it's because of our disposition, or it's because of this. And
why do you think boys like superheroes and or athletes and sports stars? Like, my favorite superhero since I was a little kid, before he was in the movies, was Captain America. So since like age 3 or 4, he was my favorite. Well, I had things in common with him. I love my country. I could relate to him because I had asthma. Steve Rogers had asthma, and then he got the super soldier treatment and became this powerful man. I'm like, yo, I want to look up to that. So kind of like this, you know. So it's just, there's something about him that I want to emulate. You know, that's just a natural thing. Like, boys want to find a guy that they can relate to in some way, or they desire to be like, and that's same-sex attraction. It's, now we use same-sex attraction as a short term for same-sex sexual attraction, or same-sex eroticization. But that's what happens when that genuine, like, God-given need for connection and the genuine, authentic attraction to other guys doesn't get fulfilled. It becomes eroticized.
And that's what we say, that, you know, the need in itself is a legitimate need, the need to connect, and it's just coming out in a way which is eroticized. And that's why for a lot of the population, it feels like you're born with it, because it's a legitimate need. It's not something which is, you know, it's not just like, you know, you can't really equate it to, oh man, I'd really like to eat a chocolate cake. It's not, you know, it's not a want. It's a need, and because the need has been sexualized, then that which makes it difficult for people to kind of say, oh, I'm, you know, and even in, you know, my journey, like speaking of myself, is like, I used to say, hang on, but my SSA isn't gone, because I'd look at men and say, there's still some attraction there. And then when I was thinking, well, if I didn't have this and I was attracted, would I still be attracted to that man? And I was like, oh yeah, I would still be attracted to that man. And then it, you know, then it made me question, okay, because we like to play the victim card, and we like to, you know, put the scapegoat on it and say, oh, you know, this damn SSA, this damn same-sex lust, it's keeping me from everything, and I can't get rid of it, and so on. And yeah, I think so much of the work is taking that perspective, and then looking at it, and then getting, like you said, having the awareness of what those attractions and what they're actually saying. So yeah, no, thanks for that. Just to mention another comment we had before this webinar, someone asked me, I think they contacted the Nicolosi Jr. clinic, and he was telling me about his success with HOCD. So that he went to a therapist. He couldn't get on to, because he was based outside of US. So it was difficult for him to get the therapy. But he went to a therapist, and they addressed HOCD. And HOCD is something which is not contested, right? So it's something which is, you know, like
that secular therapists recognize.
Yeah.
And, actually, while you're talking about that, give me a second. So one of the tools we use with guys with the OCD is the mindfulness workbook for OCD by John Hirschfield and Tom Corboy. And I love this book. It's excellent. I recommend it for clients with OCD, as well as just general anxiety and phobias as well. And the author is a guy with a history of OCD, and the John Hirschfield, and then Tom Corboy is a therapist that he ended up working with, who was like an expert. And so it combines using mindful techniques with cognitive and behavioral techniques as well. So the first part of the book is just the basics, like how to use mindfulness, how to understand OCD, how to use a behavioral approach to the compulsions, how to use a cognitive approach for the obsessions, and how to use mindfulness, combined with all of those things. So there's just really good foundation there. Because I'm telling you guys this because if you do get this book, if you do have OCD, most of the time what I find is they'll skip the beginning and go right to their chapter about homosexuality OCD. And I'm like, and then they won't understand it, because you need to read the first few chapters to understand the rest of it. Because the second part of the book is getting into specific types of obsessions, like responsibility and checking OCD, or harm OCD. Then there's HOCD, which is also called sexual orientation OCD. And this is the thought with that is, the obsession is, am I gay? Am I gay? If I found this guy a little attractive, does that mean I'm gay? And do I measure up? So there's a lot of that obsessive thinking. And then the compulsion is, well, let me watch this gay porn to see if I'm really gay. And then, so oftentimes there's a mix of genuine same-sex eroticization and OCD. We find that the techniques we're using in reintegrative therapy are not going to be very effective if we don't deal with the OCD first. So a lot of times I'm working with guys just through this stuff first. Let's work on that OCD for a bit, because we try to work through the trauma or that might be causing the attractions. If that's the approach we're taking, we're going to hit a lot of snags. We're not going to really get very far in that work if we don't deal with the obsessive thinking and the compulsive checking. That has to be worked on first, and that could take a bit of time. But
no, definitely. I think that's so important, that a lot of us take that identity so quickly, isn't it? It's like, oh, because I'm aroused by watching pornography, gay pornography, it means I must be gay, and we take that, I don't know, like very, very early, as early as we're exposed to it, we would take the identity on it. And someone, I guess, with OCD would probably obsess over it, and in that. Whereas for a lot of us, it's not. I guess across the board we take the identity too quickly on, whereas we don't realize that, you know, sexuality is fluid, you know, sexual attractions are fluid, they change. And even though they have changed for us, we still keep to the identity. Yeah. So I think for clients which actually don't have the attractions, but they have the obsession over the attraction, then yeah, and I guess it's difficult for the therapist to ascertain that if the client's already labeled themselves, or they've brought it as an identity. Yeah. That one's done. This next question on so it's the same individual. He's based in Canada, so he's wondering how to get help being based in Canada.
Ooh, Canada is definitely, it's going to be tougher. I know there probably are counselors out there. I don't know them too well, if there are any. Or I mean, like, I don't know too much about what's available in Canada. I know there's a lot of opposition to this type of work in Canada. There's just more and more legislation that's being passed there to ban this for everyone, not just for minors. But a lot of the work I do is remote. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not available, contact the Breakthrough Clinic. And Nicolosi's practice has other people that are in his practice that he can refer you to, or other associates like myself that he does consulting with who could take the case. Like, I'm seeing guys all over the planet right now at this point. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Australia, France, like UK. I got guys all over. So that's the great thing about telehealth. We can get you connected with someone. It might not be someone in person. So that's the tough thing about it. There's way more opposition growing these days, especially after last year the UN presented their findings on conversion therapy. I don't know if you remember seeing that. And it was just a terrible report that they presented. So now all these countries are like adamant that they're going to start banning conversion therapy and anything they could consider conversion therapy. If doesn't even matter what approach is taken, how professional or ethical is being done, because they threw in all these horror stories. Probably there are some genuine horror stories from like third world countries, and maybe some fundamental religious approaches that use aversion and pain, and yeah, maybe that's still out there, but not in developed countries. And so they didn't make any sort of distinction, even though I was part of a group that provided information disputing the conclusions that the investigator was coming to. But no, so it didn't matter. You get all these countries now that after that report at the UN last year that are vowing to ban conversion therapy. So the opposition is growing for this type of work. It's sad. So if you're looking for someone in person in Canada, that's going to be really difficult. You might not have to travel to the US, but you might be able to do things remotely. But if you are looking for someone in person, at the very least, what you can do is discuss it as a sexual struggle, or if there's an OCD component, work on the OCD with the therapist. If there's trauma background, just go to a therapist for trauma therapy. It's really one of the root issues that you can identify. And if you really want to see someone in person, find someone who can deal with those root issues that you know of, that you believe are contributing to it. The worst case scenario, you learn how to deal with your trauma, or you end up having tools and make progress in dealing with your OCD. So you'll be better for it either way, at least.
Fantastic. I'd like to remind people that they can raise their hands. I see Brother Mustafa who's raised their hand. So, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mustafa. I think you're on mute at the moment.
Hear me now?
Oh yes. Okay. Brilliant.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Hey guys,
Hello.
I'm glad to be now with you because just Andrew now just said something that I kind of experienced. I mean, I went through is that he said about the therapy about that going to a therapist, like just trauma therapist,
Mm-hmm.
because this is something I went to, because I live in Poland, and despite the fact that Poland is still a country where, still not that did not ban any conversion therapy, but it was really difficult to find a therapist
Mm-hmm.
who would, help me with my same-sex attraction. So yeah, I basically went to, and this is really funny because I went to a pro LGBTQ, therapist. I mean, before I texted him, I didn't know that he's a pro LGBT, so he would be one of the therapists who would confirm, the gay identity. So I before texted him and told him, would that be possible that I believe that my same-sex attraction has to do with my sexual abuse and physically and emotionally absent father. And yeah, I mean, so he told me that no, that will not be possible because there is no scientific evidence for that and stuff like that. So I said, okay, then I'm not going. But after that, I decided, okay, I'm just go, and I want to, deal with my trauma and just not to. I mean, well, if he's gonna ask me about my sexuality, I'm gonna go and tell him. But I am just going to go to him just because I want to, deal with trauma. And yeah, so I went with him to him, and we talked through it, and my sexual abuse and all this stuff, and how I view myself. Of course, I told him that I do not feel masculine, that I feel that I do not measure up because these are all I was feeling. So yeah, we went through this, and honestly, my homosexuality diminished, like because I basically I just we had that talk where he just was telling me why I should feel like masculine, what happened to me that made me feel less of man, and of course that was all my my situation, sexual abuse and stuff like that, and some comments I had during the school, like bullying stuff and stuff like that. So yeah.
I'm glad that you're able to push through that challenge with that therapist and just be like, all right, we can at least work on the trauma.
Yeah, exactly.
He disagrees with my worldview or my perspective. Well, and that's a hurdle to get through because you might have had some difficulty connecting with the therapist, but that took some effort on your part. It took a lot of courage.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Sounds like you reaped some benefit from it. So awesome.
I did. Yeah. I did a lot actually. Because the only therapist I knew that would be possible. I mean, a friend told me that he went to a therapist, but in Italy, and I live in Poland, so that would be really hard, But I said, all right, so if homosexuality and my same-sex attraction is a symptom, of stuff that happened to me in the past, like the sexual abuse and many other stuff, then all right, so I'm gonna go to, a therapist and just do my trauma, And actually, this really worked so good that I don't know. We actually did the MDR, therapy.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, and I don't know, honestly, it's just
your therapist inadvertently did reintegrative therapy.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something like he's as I told you, he's pro LGBT, so he's not like he wouldn't do that, but we wouldn't. He did ask me about my sexuality and stuff like that, but all I said that, okay, I'm dealing with it. I'm not sure yet. I don't know. So we actually focused just on trauma and my self image.
Mhm.
And yeah, since that is just, I had after therapy, and that's funny because I was prepared to have 5 years therapy, 6 years, and I was like, okay, let's do it. But the thing is that I start feeling, changes after, 2 months, because I had kind of, I don't know if that possibly, with therapy, but I had one time when I remember I wake up and, I was doing something and, I just, something like hit me, that, what happened to me is that not who I am, it's like these guys who told me like, I'm not masculine, and this is not true, this is not true anymore, because I am, I'm grown up now, I am strong, I am masculine, and it's just like, I don't know, but it just something, hit me, and I was like, wow, and I really started crying, that day, because I was so kind of, shocked, like what's going on, it just,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you for sharing, Brother Mustafa. And I think it's you're highlighting the fact that a lot of the times people ask me, what is this therapy? Is it some exotic therapy? Is it something which is off the wall?
Yeah.
And it shows that we're using standard therapeutic methods, and the only thing which is different is the direction the client wants to go in. So it doesn't, the methods, so if someone went to therapy for EMDR for another reason, they would be allowed to do that, as you kind of witnessed that.
Yeah.
But if your reason was, I want to explore my masculinity, I want to look at the wounds around my masculinity, then that's suddenly something which is not catered to, but you're using the exact same method as you've described. Thanks for sharing that. Was there any question in particular, or was that something you just wanted to share? Because I know, and Andrew mentioned trauma.
And actually, I just want to say, to you and to Andrew, that I'm grateful because, because of Ali, I knew that there is community who's, there's community that believe that change is possible, and through Andrew that I knew, all my drum, because I'm a huge fan. I watch all videos, and I'm like, I work stuff like I saw where is the problem, that I had, that I was able to go to, a therapist and, talk with him through it. So yeah, thank you guys. I'm really,
Well, thank you so much. I think your story, and if you don't have a question, that's fine. What you shared, I think, is so important, and it really illustrates something at a point that anyone can do the therapy for this issue. It's just a matter of getting your agenda out of the way and letting the client steer the direction of the counseling. And all right, if there's a root issue of trauma, just deal with that. Don't have a stake in the outcome as a therapist. Just let the client work on the root issues.
Yeah.
So
definitely, and what you will feel is just like you will have no reason to be attracted to other guy, And now I'm like, I swear, like my my attraction, to same sex, it just like I wouldn't say like it disappeared 100%. It is there, but it is, no more has an power over me. It wasn't like before, I was before having the feeling of, I need, like I need something, but now I'm like, I'm 100% have control over it. And just by, dealing with trauma. And so I also want to.
No, thank you so much, Brother Mustafa. And it's really nice to hear, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one kind of like saying it, and then that it isn't some crazy type of conversion therapy that this is. It's standard practice. EMDR is used for a whole host of things. And I think that's really important. And I think we're so grateful to say, and I think it's almost in the first, you see the most change in the first few months, isn't it? Almost in a sense that you would.
You should. I mean, if there's something blocking that, there may be a disconnect in the relationship with the therapist. There's some sort of resistance going on, or there's, like I was saying before, OCD could be one of those things that really makes it challenging. But if OCD is not as much of an issue, then you should start to experience at least. There's a couple of techniques we use. The EMDR is one to work on some of the more deeper issues underlying the origin of the eroticization. But there's also some techniques we use just to help with coping with the attractions when they come up in real time. And so we use more of a mindful approach with those things. And the idea of that is just to pay attention to your experience and pay attention to, okay, if I'm attracted to this guy right now, what's going on mentally? What am I thinking about myself in relationship to this guy I'm attracted to? What am I feeling? Get in touch with your body as well. One thing that's oftentimes a block is a lot of guys just are not in tune with their bodies and their emotions. So we do a lot of emotion-focused work. The more someone can get in touch with their emotions and their thoughts and see how they connect to the attractions, then they can see they have some degree of self-mastery or self-efficacy in handling those issues. And so that should be something we start to see earlier in the sessions. Like, I was able to handle it. The attraction came up, and I was able to think through it. And I saw when I was done doing the exercises, the level of attraction at least went down a little bit. Interesting. So that's something we see early on. So, yeah, it shouldn't take years to see any sort of benefit. But if there is, then there's got to be something to figure out with the therapeutic relationship or the approach that the therapist is taking.
I mean, I know old psychoanalytic theory would ask for long years of it, but obviously the approach has changed a lot since then. The next question is, I guess, a question we get quite a lot. What is success rate for someone with SSA to fully, in quotes, recover from therapy? Is there any potential or of harmful effect on someone who takes this therapy?
All right, so the first question, the success rate. I don't have a more current stat. There's been, one of my videos gets into it. There's different success rates. It's and depends what you mean by success, because may you still have to deal with some level of attraction throughout life? Probably. Like, I wouldn't go in expecting that to be the standard or the criteria for therapy being successful. Like absolutely no more same-sex attraction and only ever having opposite-sex attraction. Like, that's just it's pretty unrealistic to make that your criteria for success. So there's different markers of success that we can use. So level of distress over the attractions, level of shame over the attractions themselves. It's ironic, but one of the greater things you want to work on is actually reducing the shame over the attractions and come to a place of accepting that you have them. Not accepting as in embracing that as your identity, but accepting that this is an experience I have. And so it might seem like that's counterproductive, but it's actually one of the most beneficial things you can do. So we want to see a reduction in the shame and the distress over the attraction experience itself. That would be one mark of success. Another mark would be how competent you are in coping with the attractions and not going into compulsively acting out. So your level of self-mastery is going to be another area of success to use for measurement. And then there's the attraction itself. You look at it as two different scales. Degree of same-sex attraction and degree of opposite-sex attraction. So for some guys, they may experience a reduction in frequency or intensity of same-sex attraction. Very often I hear, it's like, yeah, still, I get the attraction. But it's more like a gnat. You know, they compare it to like a housefly that bothers them.
Yeah, be right there.
It's not dominant. And that means that they've gotten to this place of a real mindful approach to it, that they recognize, and when I talk about mindfulness, one of the principles of mindfulness is to understand that your thoughts are just your thoughts. They're not demands, and they might not even be accurate depictions of reality. So a thought and attraction only has significance if you choose to give it significance. So when you become fluent in a mindful approach to this issue, you can get to the point where, yeah, sure, I have the attractions every now and then. I find a guy attraction. I might get a little arousal here and there, but it's not that big a deal anymore. It doesn't bother me that much, and it's more faint. It's not as like glaring in my head, and like, oh my gosh, I got to do something about this. So that's oftentimes the experience if you're guys who've made significant progress in this area. So the same-sex attraction may go down. Remember, it's all in a continuum. This isn't strict categories of gay, straight, bisexual. It's matters of degrees. And these are experiences. This is not your identity. The attraction is an experience you have. So we may measure success by how frequently or how intense you experience same-sex eroticization. Okay? And then, all right, to what extent do you experience opposite-sex attraction? So some guys may see a reduction in the SSA but not see an increase in the OSA. And that may not be considered a success to some, but might be considered a success to others because, like, okay, at least it makes it easier for me to live as a single guy. I'm not as stressed over my same-sex attraction. I would say there's still more work that could possibly be done to potentially increase the opposite-sex attraction. A lot of times it's working through fears that we have. A lot of anxiety about relating to the opposite sex then needs to be worked through. So anyway, rates. We have some general rates from different studies. If you're talking about complete change, like complete reversal of attraction, that is very rare. We're talking like in the 20 to 30% success, at least based on the past studies. There is a study that should be coming out later this fall, study that we've been working on for years, or I shouldn't say we, I wasn't working on it, but Carolyn Pileb, one of the past presidents of the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice, started this with Joe Nicolosi Sr. It was a longitudinal study of 75 participants in Joe Nicolosi's clinic. He died partway through the study. So it was a 5-year longitudinal study. Almost near the end, he passed away, unfortunately. Joe Jr. continued the work. So they still got 75 clients, continued the work, and then they measured their progress. And it was also important to answer your second question simultaneously is they were checking on what was the level of same-sex attraction, level of opposite-sex attraction before starting treatment, and also what was their mental health levels, like were the levels of stress, suicidality, anxiety, depression. And we wanted to see, because one of the claims is this therapy is harmful. Okay, that's one of the assertions from our opponents. So we want to be like, all right, is it harmful? Let's test. Let's measure their levels of mental health and stability prior to doing the treatment, during treatment, and after treatment. And the preliminary results, I think I was at one of the Alliance conferences when Nicolosi was presenting the halfway results, and it's like, so far we're seeing that the same-sex attraction is reducing, and the level of distress, the suicidality, the depression is also reducing, and higher levels of emotional stability and elevation, mood elevation are increasing. So that was at the midway point. And since the study's been done, it's been done for a few years at this point. It's just been tough to get this study published because of all the opposition. This study went through a lot of revisions, went through multiple submissions. Peers will review it, give their input, and they'll rewrite it, and they'll address all their concerns. So Carolyn was telling me, in the end, she's like, it's a very strong study. We addressed all these concerns, but then people would back out. The journals would back out and not publish it. So I was getting updates from her about, when is this study being published? I've been waiting on this study so I can finally be like, here is evidence that this treatment is effective and beneficial and not harmful. But she's like, the results show that it's been helpful. So finally, it's going to get published. It wasn't from one of the journals we wanted to get it published from at first, but it's still something. We're shooting for one of the more prestigious journals, because we can always publish it through the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice, but we wanted one that people will get more access to and they'll see it more. So
that's really good news. I have been speaking to Caroline Pila, and I've been saying, when is it due? And each time I speak to her, she's like, oh, it's almost there. It's almost there.
Yeah.
So it's, so would you say in 2-3 months time?
We're looking at probably October.
October, okay. That's really great news.
That's inside info. I probably shouldn't even share that.
That's the first.
Probably said too much. But Carolyn keeps telling me, giving me updates. Joe keeps giving me updates. It's something that we've all been asking about. So it's not like it's a secret that the study has been done.
Yeah.
It's just the question is, when is it going to get published? So I forget the name of the journal, so I won't tell you that much. But it should be sometime this fall. We've been eager to get this out there. There's going to be good, solid evidence that it's going to be really difficult for people to dispute it, because it's been through a lot of peers already. We've given their criticism, and those criticisms were addressed. So it's a very strong study.
There has been previous studies, hasn't there? Forgot the name. I think there was one in 2007. It's just gone off my head. I think there was one also on the Atlantis report. Published.
There are some. A lot of the previous studies, though, weren't prospective. A lot of them were retrospective.
Okay.
So they don't have as much weight.
As in, they've not been following the client throughout.
Yeah, meaning like they didn't test the client before treatment and then after treatment. A lot of the studies were people who are already gone through treatment, and then they're asked questions about their treatment that they've had.
Retrospectively, okay.
So, which is still it's meaningful, but it's not as
scientific as a before and after. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and also the funny thing is, a lot of the studies, well, all the studies that are used to criticize this sort of therapy, those were retrospective too. Like the Shidlow and Schroeder one.
Mm-hmm.
That's based off retrospective data from people who said they did the therapy on average 12 years ago. So it's like, how good is their memory? You know, it's not, they're talking about it like it just happened. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, because I got a video you can watch that gets into the criticism of that Shidlow and Schroeder study. It's insane that's the main study cited and used by the APA to denounce this type of therapy, and that different states are using to use as justification for their therapy bans. But it's really shoddy research. So if they really want a definitive answer, is this effective and is it harmful, then they should have been clamoring to do a study like the one that Carolyn has been doing.
Right.
The fact that there's been so much opposition shows they really don't want the truth.
And this is the frustration, like the UN document or any other document isn't backed by a study, or it's not backed by, when they say, okay, this is harmful, and then they'll either link to one story or like a media, like a media outlet story. And the frustration is that, okay, if the LGBT community doesn't want this therapy, fine, don't have it, but if you ban it, you're affecting the people who do want that support. And surely it would make sense to speak to those people who would, and you would normally find them in, I don't know, religious settings, or you'd find them in, you have to kind of look at what that setting is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost like, the audience is biased. And even in the UK, they say, oh, we did the LGBT survey and it said, so many people had conversion therapy. Well, they don't define what conversion therapy is. So it could be anything from, something illegal.
Conversation. The stuff they count as conversion therapy is ridiculous.
Exactly.
Just talking to someone like on the street and telling them that you think homosexuality is wrong. That's conversion therapy. Like the stuff they count is so ridiculous.
And even the UN definition is so problematic because it says it's an umbrella term. Well, how can you put corrective rape and licensed professional therapy in the same category? And yet they do with, with the statement. So it's, and I think that's what, we mentioned Canada, and that's what's happened in Canada is that they put a very ill-worded law, which is now problematic for them because it actually, listening to one of the people in the parliament was saying that it now discriminates the LGBTQ because it's, how it's worded has far-reaching effects. So this is what you find that wherever the bans have been, whether it's Australia, Germany, Canada, US, everyone's got a different definition of what this conversion therapy is, because they obviously haven't cited a research, or they haven't, kind of done their
They just cite position papers.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, kind of I'm studying counseling at the moment, and there's very few cases where counseling enters law, as in therapy enters law. There's very, very few cases. Yep. And the one they refer to is like really old, like in the 70s or the 80s, whenever we're, going through it. And this would perhaps be the most recent effect of therapy entering into law, because therapy in its essence, even they signed this memorandum in the UK, Memorandum of Conversion Therapy, which is like a political statement by a lot of these parties. But even in the memorandum, it states you can't prefer one sexuality over the other. So in that statement, if you're doing gay affirmative therapy, that's against the
obviously.
So it's an affirming approach, but they don't see it. They don't see it like that. They say, oh, okay, anything which is, if, for example, if we say the rainbow covers everything which is non-heterosexual, for example, if we say that, then we say, okay, we fall in that category as well. We have the attractions, but we don't act on them, or we have a moral compass or whatever, we're working towards the attractions, and we fall in that as well. But then, has this population ever been surveyed? Has people who are struggling with it, don't identify with a sexual identity as such, has there been a survey for that? So I think that study would be definitely very, very interesting. And like I say, going through peer review and going through the diligence, that'd be something to look out for.
Yeah, that's like a point that Christopher Doyle makes. He refers to people with unwanted same-sex attraction as the you. Yeah, so, or Q and U. So Q for questioning and U. Questioning goes both ways. Questioning, should I consider myself gay or should I try to pursue heterosexuality? But the LGBT movement just looks at questioning as questioning heterosexuality. And so they only see it one way. It's all ideologically driven. So we got to fight to preserve the right for people to pursue normative sexuality as much as we can, but at the same time, my prediction, even though I fear this, is that we're going to learn this lesson the hard way. And it'll be after we've gone, this LGBT movement has gone so far that they've affirmed everything, and we just enter a state of sexual chaos, that people start realizing, maybe we should start putting up some standards and making it so people can actually get the therapy they want to get back to some norms.
Well, you're seeing that already in some countries where they're saying, no, we're not, or where they're opposing a lot of it, And we were seeing that in the UK with Stonewall being, which is the main charity which brought the memorandum together, which a lot of the government bodies are leaving because of its extreme views on transgender issues, where it's saying that, for you to be inclusive, you need to allow men into women's bathrooms and, things like that, which is like an extreme kind of view, which doesn't reflect where the law is at least. So it's almost, Stonewall's a lobbyist group. It's not a government organization as such. So I think we are slowly seeing signs of people saying, hang on, we had recently the case of, I don't know if you saw, Maya Forrester.
Maya, Forrester,
in that. So I think slowly people are kind of seeing that, because even from a secular perspective, you can't, whenever they say conversion therapy, why don't they talk about gay affirmative therapy, because that's conversion in a sense, as well, because you're the therapist has a preconceived notion of what healthy sexuality looks like. So
literally, in some cases, they're encouraging the client to abandon their faith and adopt one that's more gay affirming. So that is kind of definition
that's
conversion,
isn't it? So
it's not objective. It's decidedly not objective. If you look at the research, you look at authors who promote gay affirmative treatment, they'll be open and honest and say, no, this is not an objective. We think this issue is so important that you shouldn't be objective, and that you should try to persuade the client to adopt a particular worldview on this issue. So that sure sounds like imposing your worldview on the client.
Absolutely. And I think in the case of children where, at least in the UK, when they're seen in the Tavistock clinic, where people have been, affirmed, you can change the gender, and then they have then said, this isn't something that we want to do later on in life, and then they've realized being affirming of what a child wants, because they have gender dysphoria at that time, is not the most healthy, surgery. I can't believe surgery is the first step in addressing gender dysphoria, in some of these clinics. So
it's a shame it took us the trans issue for us to start waking up to this a bit. I wish it would have been the homosexuality issue we started waking up to it. You're like, let's start investigating this. Let's get the facts first before we start condemning a therapy or treatment approach that we actually don't know much about.
Absolutely, yeah. So. Absolutely, yeah. Conscious of time as well. We've gone a little bit over. Are you okay to take one more question?
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Fine. The question is, what is the first step you would advise to take up for the person dealing with SSA? how does one fight with the constant internal conflict he has, and does marriage help in dealing with this?
Okay. First step, well, kind of went over that earlier with just seeking help, and I would say avoid falling into self-condemnation over this. Understand that this is an experience you're having. You didn't choose to have the attractions. It's your choice in how you address it. But I look at people who, when they act out, it just, to them, it makes sense to act out because they don't understand where the attraction is coming from. So when they're choosing to, even when they choose to identify as gay, I look at it as, okay, they're making to them what seems like a logical conclusion because this is pervasive. It's an experience I've had for so many years. They're not informed of other ways of looking at the issue. So I would say it's an ill-informed conclusion to come to. So I would say don't fall into a trap of condemning yourself for having had the attractions. Recognize it as an attraction, as an experience, but not your identity. This is not who you are. There's not a gene that forces you to then unite sexually with someone of the same sex. Okay, this is not, you're not destined for this. But also start with the realization that the feelings, the desires, the attractions may persist to some degree or another throughout life. That in itself is not a sin. It's not something that that you are ultimately the cause of. So take a bit of a comfort and assurance in that this is an experience you're having. It's not a sentence and it's not a condemnation. And so we want to reduce the fear of looking at this issue. So I would say as far as first steps go, that would be my first step, is just understand this is an experience you're having. This is not an act you're committing. You didn't ask for these thoughts or desires. These are signs. So I would say look at them as with an approach of curiosity. This is the question that the gay affirmative therapist, just as well as the fundamentalist therapist or counselor or pastor or religious leader, won't do. With the therapy approach that we do with reintegrative therapy is we make a distinction between the two extremes. You've got the gay affirmative approach, which looks at, oh, your attraction is a sign of who or what you are. And so they're going to just encourage you to embrace it and live it out in some way. Okay? And also then try to convince your family and loved ones to accept it and embrace it as well, and then get society at large to embrace it. All right, so that's the gay affirmative approach. The anti-gay approach is to just, nope, you got to stuff it down. You need to suppress the feelings. You need to force the behaviors to change. And that may be one that we're likely to lean toward because it may seem consistent with our worldview and our religious values, but it ultimately isn't addressing what's underlying the attractions. And so we're taking more of a mindful approach where if you're experiencing the attractions, we're going to be like, have an approach of curiosity.
I'll clean up the stuff
Why am I
tomorrow.
having these attractions?
I could put the stuff away tomorrow.
Gay affirmative approach is just going to, and sometimes the fundamentalist approach, because I see this in the Christian world as well, they'll just assume, well, it's just something you have. It's just, you're born with it. And they don't really look deeper into it. And so they're just like, well, you're born with it, so you either embrace it or you try to suppress it. And I would say, that's too simplistic. What's underneath it? What was going on before you noticed the attraction? What emotional state were you in? What other desires do you think might be underneath there? Any emotional wounds? Just develop an approach of curiosity to it. Not condemning yourself for having them, but just curious. And that's an approach that will lead toward healing, towards self-compassion. So I hope that helps. That helps as far as a first step.
Absolutely, yeah. And what would you say about marriage?
Oh yeah, the marriage. Yeah, no, I would not look at marriage as like a cure. Look at marriage as a goal to get to. Also, still that fundamentalist approach would be like just deny you have the attraction, suppress them, and try to get married, as if marriage will then be the cure. And that's like a recipe for having a really terrible marriage, because you want the marriage to come out of a place of genuine desire for your spouse. So I would just try to be patient with yourself. Don't try to force anything to happen yet.
Yeah, and I think that's something which is we see quite a lot in our Muslim community, perhaps maybe even the Christian community, because the only permissible way to engage in sexual relations is in the bounds of marriage, and then people think, okay, you know, obviously well-intended people around them think, okay, this person probably has too much sexual energy because they don't understand what the SSA is, for example, right? And then they're like, okay, this person needs to get married.
There's an outlet. You need a place to put that sexual energy.
Yeah. And we have this in that, you know, when people come to us and I say, okay, have you done any self-awareness work, you know? And I think the other question which comes in is like, can I not tell my spouse, in a sense, you know? And you know, one of the things that we kind of say is, when you're married, there's no cover, right? So you can't hide stuff. It doesn't work. You can't realistically live two lives, and if you are, you're probably not. I don't know what your marriage is, but it's not something which is truthful. And what we kind of tell people is to, when you reach that point that you can, you know, kind of you're ready to engage in an opposite sex relationship, that you share where you're at with the, you don't have to tell everything, but you have to kind of tell, where am I physically at in terms of this? And it's okay to say, you know what, I want to take things slow, for example, at the start, because this is something which is difficult for me, or I have issues around intimacy, you know, because I've seen a lot of cases where, because it's not been discussed before the marriage, both parties have different expectations of what intimacy is, or what, you know, and then that doesn't get kind of addressed. And in very religious circles, it's almost like get them married, you know, in a sense. And I don't know if you've seen that, or
Yeah, I see that a lot. I work with several Muslim clients right now, and so that one guy was divorced because he thought the marriage would be a solution or something. He also didn't get to know his wife very well before they got married. They courted a little bit, and she was totally different during the courtship, and then when they got married, she was totally different. So that's there needs to be some degree of authenticity and really getting to know the person well beforehand. And I got another guy that I'm working with who he started dating a woman while we were in therapy together, and he was like, should I break up with her? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm not going to tell you either way. Just let's make sure the reason you're not with her or breaking up with her isn't out of shame. And I'm like, and also, if you did have the genuine attraction to her, is she the type of girl that you would like to be with? And he was like, yeah, actually. I'm like, okay, so take your time with it, maybe. And so that's what he landed on. He's like, he was honest with her that he's working on some issues. He didn't share everything with her, but they're going to take it slow. And so, okay, maybe that'll be a good way for us to work through some of the assertiveness issues and some of the anxiety about being vulnerable with a woman. You have someone that you can actually kind of use as an example for things like, can I actually be authentic with this woman I'm dating? Or like just keep it from getting too serious yet if you're not sure where it's going. I would say once you're at the point where the relationship is getting serious, it's best for her to be aware of the issue. But that means also the whole community needs to have a degree of understanding about what same-sex attraction is. And if we got guys who are dealing with this issue who are growing in that understanding, but the community at large doesn't understand, that's going to be really a challenge to share that with your potential spouse, or you're already married, share it with your spouse, because she's just going to look at it as, oh, you just have too much lust. I'm not enough for you. You don't really love me. Or, so it's a community-wide change that needs to happen. We see this in the Christian community as well. So it's just a lot of misinformation out there, and so the woman needs to be prepared as well to better understand this issue, to make it safe for you to share with her.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, no, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah,
so
we tried to
much.
shoot for shorter, and I'm afraid I went long with my story at the beginning.
No, I think your answers have been very detailed, and I like that. And I watched, and I think the viewers, as one of them noted today, as a fan of your YouTube channel and your posts and so on. And it's really good to have. There's so many topics where the media is just one-sided. You don't really see the other side. So it's always good to kind of your platform gives that voice that for the community.
I can say there's no one else making videos like mine.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, why not? And I think it's really good because it puts. I think there's a fear that, because if I have the minority view, then I'm gonna get lynched or something like that. But what you find is that when people start listening, and people have the capability to see both perspectives, and then people can see, okay, this is just another perspective, and I think a lot of people appreciate people who have that courage, like yourself, to speak out and say, hang on, this isn't right. And kind of we have even in our faith, we have the duty to speak out against oppression, to speak out against injustice, which is being done. So no, I salute you in your efforts for that, and kind of protecting people, protecting the clients, protecting the people that you're seeing from what can only be described as discrimination, in professionally for these people in getting help. So no, and how, and I know a lot of people will now ask me about how do we get hold of Andy.
Well, you can reach me on YouTube. Just jump in my comments there. You can email me, mr.andrew.rod@gmail.com. So I every now and then I get someone who contacts me, wants to do counseling with me, and I let them know my availability is limited right now, but I try to accommodate when I get someone who's really serious about it. So that's one way to contact me. I'm on Facebook as well. You can just look for Andrew Rodriguez Counseling Services, and I might change the name of that to just be the same thing as my YouTube channel at some point. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, I'm on YouTube. I'm also on Parler, Odyssey, locals. I'm trying to be on multiple platforms because
Yeah,
at
you
any
don't know
moment I can
which
get
one they're
booted.
going to shut down.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, yeah.